So let's welcome in right now Robert Bud McFarlane, as I mentioned, former National Security Advisor to Ronald Reagan and co-founder of the U.S. Energy Security Council. Mr. McFarlane, it's a pleasure and an honor to speak with you, sir.
Steve, it's good to be with you.
Thanks
for calling.
I love that. I love that very, very distinguishable voice. It sounds exactly the same as the last time I heard it. Let me ask you, sir. The letter that you wrote to the President of the United States on his dealings with Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. What prompted you specifically? Was there what made you actually say, "I'm going to write this"?
Well, having spent much of my life during the Cold War, I think people have forgotten the importance of that victory. And it was that by winning, we in the West really had advanced the ideas of Judeo-Christian principles, such things as the rule of law, individual freedom, democracy, so forth, and free enterprise further eastward, and made it possible for Poland, the countries of Central Europe and Hungary and so forth, to have a better shot at the future instead of being under the thumb of a totalitarian Soviet Union. Well, suddenly, with the invasion of a sovereign country, that is Russia, by invading Ukraine, that idea, that possibility, that hope was extinguished, or it looked like it was about to be. And so it was important that we underscore for the President that that tide that had been running in favor of the West, the United States and Western Europe, North America, in favor of this trend toward democracy and the rule of law, was being rolled back. And we needed to take a stand here and help Ukraine maintain its own sovereign independence and hold out that hope that what happens in Ukraine is not going to happen in Poland and Hungary and Bulgaria and Romania and so forth. So this is an important watershed event that I thought really needed to be underscored.
Well, and you know, one of the things you say in the first paragraph of the letter is imposing real costs against the government of Vladimir Putin, and also, and this is important, I think, very important, and to enhance the deterrence posture of NATO. We spoke to Doug Feith in an earlier hour, and one of the things he said, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, is that right now, the United States and NATO and whoever, you know, the generals of NATO, they have to be making it clear to Putin that if he does dare to do any of the things you just alluded to, sir, that there will be war. There will be consequences of war because NATO will defend these countries. Feith is afraid that Putin thinks he might be able to break up NATO without a shot being fired if he goes into one of these countries because they won't do anything.
Well, there's that very real risk, and the only way it's going to be avoided is with strong Western leadership, and that has to come from the United States. The European countries are consumed by their own problems, primarily economic problems, but they could rise and be inspired to come together again and to invoke Article 5 of the NATO alliance. It goes back all the way to 1949. But for them to do that, it's going to take very strong, principled leadership by the United States.
Do you think that this administration is capable of it and or willing to do so?
Well, I guess I have to say that looking at the history of red lines drawn in Syria that became meaningless, one has to be pessimistic. But there are instruments of leverage we can use. For example, we signed not too long ago an agreement with Russia called the Nuclear 1-2-3 Agreement that held out the hope that they could become the beneficiaries of a nuclear permanent disposal site in Russia, so that the United States, France, Japan, and all the countries in the Far East that use peaceful nuclear power could dispose of their nuclear waste. As you know, in our own country, Harry Reid foreclosed that opportunity when he vetoed our disposal site in Nevada.
Right.
But it would have gained the Russians billions and billions of dollars. Well, we could suspend that agreement, and it would be a big hit for Russia. But we have to do carefully things that make clear we're not going to war, but we're not going to put up with aggression against sovereign countries.
Yeah.
Going to the point of what really was at the heart of Ukraine's vulnerability, it was energy and reliance upon Russian energy. Well, we in the West have to come up with a way to help Ukraine avoid that vulnerability by developing its own energy, and there is a huge amount of coal bed methane, which is natural gas, right in Ukraine that Russia has prevented Ukraine from developing. We could help them do that. We could also find alternative sources of gas other than Russia, to bring gas from Azerbaijan, from North Africa, from Israel, from Cyprus, from Greece. So
no, and you lay all these out beautifully in the letter to President Obama, which I assume you haven't gotten a response from yet, correct?
Well, no, not yet.
I don't want to let you go, sir, because we're a little short on time, and I have a hard break coming up. I do want to ask you, how would Ronald Reagan have gotten along with Vladimir Putin? How would that relationship have gone? It's unfair to bring it to you at the end here in the last minute, but how would it have gone?
Well, it never would have reached this point. Reagan would have, from the day he came to office, welded a close working relationship with our NATO allies to where they knew they enjoyed strong leadership, principled leadership, and a strategy for strength, both military, political, and economic, so that it was clear to Russia or any Russian leader that you didn't want to take the risk of going up against the West, the United States, and Western Europe.
Mr. McFarlane, I'm up against the break now. Listen, I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back, sir.
Been a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. That's Robert McFarlane, ladies and gentlemen, former National Security Advisor to President Ronald Reagan. On the Steve Malzberg Show, the panel's next. Don't go away.